What happens when a country music superstar and television personality completely loses his composure? During a live morning show interview, well, that's exactly what viewers witnessed when Blake Shelton appeared on Today with Jenna and Friends. And what started as a routine promotional appearance quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story gets absolutely wild. The morning began like any other for the popular NBC show. Jenna Bush Hager was joined by her rotating panel of celebrity friends, including comedian Hasan Minhaj and lifestyle guru Carson Kressley, all settling into their familiar spots around the cozy studio setup. The energy was light and playful as they prepared to welcome Blake Shelton, who was scheduled to discuss his latest album and upcoming tour dates. As Blake walked onto the set, the usual pleasantries were exchanged. Jenna greeted him with her characteristic warmth. "Blake, it's so great to have you back on the show. You look fantastic, and we're all excited to hear about what you've been up to lately." Blake settled into his chair with that easy Oklahoma charm that had made him a household name. "Well, thanks for having me, Jenna. Always a pleasure to be here with you folks." Carson jumped in with enthusiasm. "We have to talk about the new album, Blake. The fans are absolutely loving it, and the reviews have been incredible. What inspired this particular collection of songs?" For a moment, everything seemed perfectly normal. Blake smiled and launched into his prepared talking points about the creative process, the studio sessions, and his collaboration with various songwriters. But seasoned viewers of the show might have noticed something slightly off about his demeanor. There was a tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable. Hasan, known for his sharp wit and tendency to ask probing questions, leaned forward with interest. "Blake, I have to ask, and I hope you don't mind me being direct here, but there's been a lot of speculation in the media lately about some behind-the-scenes drama in your world. How do you handle all the gossip and rumors that seem to follow celebrities everywhere?" The question hung in the air for just a beat too long. Blake's smile faltered almost imperceptibly, and viewers could see his jaw clenched slightly before he responded. "Well, Hasan, I think that's just part of the business. You know, people are going to say what they're going to say, and I've learned over the years that the best thing to do is just focus on the music and the fans." Jenna, sensing perhaps that the energy was shifting, tried to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "Absolutely. And speaking of fans, they're so excited about the tour. Can you tell us about some of the cities you'll be visiting?" But Hasan wasn't quite ready to let his previous question go. He had that look that regular viewers of his comedy specials would recognize, the one that meant he was about to dig a little deeper. "I hear you, Blake, but don't you think there's a responsibility that comes with being in the public eye? I mean, when your personal life becomes tabloid fodder, doesn't that affect the people around you?" Carson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly picking up on the mounting tension. He glanced between Hasan and Blake with the expression of someone who could feel a storm brewing. "Maybe we should talk about the tour dates. I know our viewers would love to know when they might get to see you perform live." Blake's response was measured, but there was an edge creeping into his voice that hadn't been there moments before. "Hasan, I'm not really sure what you're getting at here. I came on the show to talk about music, not to get into some kind of philosophical debate about celebrity culture." The studio audience, who had been murmuring appreciatively during the earlier part of the interview, fell noticeably quieter. Even the camera operators seemed to sense that something was shifting in the room's dynamic. Jenna tried once more to redirect, her media training kicking in as she attempted to smooth over the growing friction. "Of course, Blake, and we appreciate you being here to share your music with us. The new single is really catching fire on the charts, isn't it?" But Hasan, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the warning signs, pressed forward with another pointed question. "I'm just saying, Blake, when you're in a position of influence, don't you think there's value in being transparent with your audience? They invest so much emotionally in your story." Blake's knuckles were white where he gripped the arms of his chair, and his voice dropped to a dangerously quiet level. "Listen, Hasan, I don't know what kind of interview you think this is supposed to be, but I'm starting to feel like I'm being ambushed here." The word ambushed seemed to electrify the entire studio. Jenna's eyes widened as she realized this interview was spiraling completely out of her control, and Carson looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. But Hasan, whether driven by journalistic instinct or simply unable to read the room, doubled down on his approach. "Blake, I'm not trying to ambush anyone," Hasan said, his voice taking on a defensive tone. "I'm asking legitimate questions that your fans deserve answers to. When someone builds their brand on being authentic and down to earth, shouldn't they be willing to address the elephant in the room?" Blake's face flushed red, and he leaned forward in his chair, his voice rising noticeably. "What elephant? What are you talking about, man? I came here to promote my album, not to be psychoanalyzed by someone who thinks they know my life better than I do." Carson attempted to interject with a nervous laugh. "Guys, maybe we should take a quick break and Regroup here. The energy is getting a little intense, but Blake was having none of it. He turned his attention directly to Hasan, his Oklahoma accent becoming more pronounced as his agitation grew. You want to talk about authenticity? How about being authentic enough to tell me what this is really about instead of dancing around with these vague accusations? Hasan straightened in his seat, clearly caught off guard by the direct confrontation but unwilling to back down. I'm talking about the reports, Blake. The stories about your behavior on set. The conflicts with production staff. The rumors about your attitude toward other artists. People are saying you're not the person you present yourself to be on television. The studio fell dead silent. Even the usually chattering audience members seemed to hold their breath as Blake processed what had just been said. His face went through a series of expressions, confusion, anger, and something that looked almost like hurt before settling into cold fury. Reports. Blake's voice was dangerously quiet now. What reports? From who? Anonymous sources. Tabloid. Journalists looking to make a name for themselves by tearing down someone else's reputation. Jenna finally found her voice, though it came out higher pitched than usual. Blake Hasan, maybe we should all take a step back here. This conversation has taken a turn that I don't think any of us expected. Blake stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward with the force of his movement. No, Jenna, I want to hear this. I want to know exactly what this guy thinks he knows about my character, about how I treat people, about who I am when the cameras aren't rolling. Carson made one last desperate attempt at damage control. Blake, please, let's all just breathe. For a second, this doesn't have to escalate any further. But Blake was beyond reasoning with at this point. He turned back to Hasan, with fire in his eyes. You know what? I've been in this business for over 20 years. I've worked with hundreds of people, from musicians to crew members to television personalities. And in all that time, I've tried to treat everyone with respect and professionalism, but apparently, that's not good enough for you. Hasan, realizing he may have pushed too far but unable to find a graceful way out, attempted to clarify his position. Blake, I'm not attacking your character personally. I'm asking about industry rumors and whether you think celebrities have a responsibility to address them when they affect public perception. Blake let out a bitter laugh. Industry rumors? You mean gossip? You mean the kind of malicious garbage that people spread when they want to tear down someone else's success? And you think I have a responsibility to dignify that nonsense with a response? The camera operators were having a field day, capturing every angle of the confrontation as it unfolded. Viewers at home were witnessing something rarely seen on daytime television, a complete breakdown of the usual polite facade that governed these types of promotional appearances. Jenna made another attempt to regain control. Blake, we all respect you enormously, and I think there may have been some miscommunication here about the direction of the interview. Blake shook his head, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Miscommunication? No, Jenna, I think the communication was pretty clear. Your friend here decided to use your show as a platform to ambush a guest with unsubstantiated rumors and then act like he's doing some kind of public service by putting me on trial. Hasan's face reddened as he realized the interview had gone completely off the rails. Blake, that was never my intention. I'm a comedian, not an investigative journalist. I was asking questions that I thought your fans might want answered. Blake's response was immediate and cutting. My fans come to my concerts. They buy my albums. They follow my career because they connect with my music. They don't need you to be their spokesperson, and they don't need you to interrogate me on their behalf. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point, and everyone could feel it. Blake was still standing, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, while Hasan sat frozen in his chair, clearly realizing he had pushed one of country music's biggest stars way too far. Carson looked like he was about to have a panic attack, and Jenna was frantically trying to figure out how to salvage what was left of her show. You know what the real problem is here? Blake continued, his voice getting louder with each word. The real problem is that people like you think you have the right to tear down anyone who's achieved something in their life. You hide behind this idea that you're asking important questions, but really you're just feeding into the same toxic culture that destroys careers and families. Hasan finally found his voice again, though it came out shaky and defensive. Blake, I never intended to destroy anything. I was trying to have a real conversation instead of just the usual promotional fluff that these shows are known for. Blake's laugh was harsh and humorless. A real conversation. You call spreading gossip an innuendo a real conversation. Let me tell you what a real conversation looks like. Hasan, a real conversation involves respect, honesty, and good faith. What you did here was set a trap. Carson tried one more time to intervene, his voice pleading. Guys, please, we're live. On television, can we try to find some common ground here? This is getting really uncomfortable for everyone. Blake whirled around to face Carson, and for a moment it looked like he might redirect his anger toward the lifestyle guru. Uncomfortable. You're damn right it's uncomfortable. Carson, it's uncomfortable when someone invites you into their home, so to speak, and then allows you to be blindsided by someone with an agenda. Jenna's media training was working overtime as she attempted to de-escalate. Blake, I want you to know that this was never our intention. We invited you here because we genuinely wanted to hear about your music and your tours. I think there may have been some crossed wires about the direction of the interview. But Blake was having none of it. He pointed directly at Hasan, his voice rising to a near shout. Don't try to smooth this over, Jenna. Your friend here knew exactly what he was doing. He came prepared with rumors and accusations, and he waited until we were live on air to spring them on me. That's not crossed wires, that's an ambush, plain and simple. Hasan made one final attempt to explain himself, though his voice lacked the confidence it had carried earlier. Blake, I swear to you, I was just trying to ask the kinds of questions that people are discussing online and in the media. I thought it would be more interesting than talking about tour dates and album sales. Blake's response was immediate and explosive. More interesting for who? For you? For your career? Did you think you were going to make a name for yourself by trying to take down Blake Shelton on live television? The studio audience was completely silent now, watching this train wreck unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. Some viewers were pulling out their phones to record what they were seeing, knowing instinctively that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. You want to know what's really interesting, Hasan? Blake continued, his voice dripping with contempt. What's interesting is how quickly someone will throw away basic human decency for the chance to create a viral moment. What's interesting is how little regard you have for the impact your words might have on someone's family, their career, their mental health. Carson was visibly shaking now, looking back and forth between Blake and the cameras as if trying to figure out how to make this nightmare end. Blake, please, I think we all just want to find a way to move forward here. Blake shook his head, his anger now mixed with what looked like genuine hurt. Move forward. Carson, there's no moving forward from this. This man just accused me, on live television, of being some kind of fraud. He suggested that everything I've built, everything I've worked for, is based on a lie. Hasan tried to interrupt. Blake, I never said you were a fraud. I was asking about rumors, not stating facts. Blake cut him off with a sharp gesture. Rumors that you chose to give a platform to. Rumors that you decided were worth asking about. On national television, without any evidence, without any verification, without any consideration for the damage they might do. The control room was undoubtedly in chaos, with producers trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial, end the segment, or let this explosive confrontation continue to play out. But Blake wasn't finished yet. You know what really gets me, Hasan? What really makes me angry is that I've spent my entire career trying to be genuine with my fans. I've shared my struggles, my failures, my personal life, because I thought it mattered to be real with people. And here you are, suggesting that none of that authenticity is real, that it's all some kind of calculated act. Jenna made one desperate, final attempt to restore order. Blake, everyone here respects your authenticity and your contributions to music. I think we can all agree that this conversation has gone in a direction that none of us anticipated. Blake turned to look at her, and for a moment his expression softened slightly. Jenna, I have nothing but respect for you and your show. But I can't sit here and let someone attack my character and then pretend like it's all just part of normal interview banter. Blake took a deep breath, and for a moment it seemed like he might be willing to try to find some way to resolve the situation. But then his eyes fell back on Hasan, who was sitting there looking like he wished he could disappear, and something in Blake's expression hardened again. You know what? I'm done with this, Blake said, his voice suddenly calm in a way that was somehow more unsettling than when he'd been shouting. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured about authenticity by someone who thought it was appropriate. To ambush a guest on a morning show, Hasan made one last desperate attempt at reconciliation. Blake, please, can we just talk about this like adults? I obviously misjudged the situation, and I'm sorry if I offended you. Blake's response was swift and cutting. If you offended me, Hasan, you didn't just offend me. You disrespected me. You disrespected my career, and you disrespected everyone who works hard in this industry by suggesting that success is somehow suspicious and needs to be interrogated. Carson was practically hyperventilating at this point, looking around the studio as if searching for an escape route. Blake, maybe we could take a quick break and then come back and start fresh with a different topic. Blake shook his head, his decision clearly made. No, Carson, there's no starting fresh from this. When someone shows you who they really are, you believe them. And what I've seen here today is someone who's willing to sacrifice basic human decency for the sake of creating drama. Jenna was making frantic hand signals to someone off camera, presumably trying to get direction from the control room about how to handle this unprecedented situation. Blake, I understand you're upset, and I want you to know that we value our relationship with you and your team. Blake looked at her with something that might have been pity. Jenna, I know this isn't your fault directly, but the fact that this was allowed to happen on your show, under your watch, that says something about the kind of environment you're creating here. The words hit Jenna like a physical blow, and she visibly recoiled. Carson reached over and put a supportive hand on her arm, but his own face was pale with shock at how completely the situation had deteriorated. Blake began to remove his microphone, his movements deliberate and final. I came here today in good faith, expecting to have a normal conversation about my music and my tours. Instead, I was subjected to what can only be described as a character assassination attempt. Hasan tried one more time to explain himself, his voice barely above a whisper. Blake, I swear that was never my intention. I'm a comedian. I ask questions. Sometimes I push boundaries. It's what I do. Blake paused in removing his microphone to look directly at Hasan. And I'm a musician. Hasan, I create art. I perform for people. I try to bring joy into their lives. That's what I do. The difference is, what I do doesn't involve tearing other people down. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the cameras and the distant sound of traffic outside. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Blake finished removing his microphone and set it down on the coffee table with a soft click that seemed to echo through the silent studio. I've been in this business long enough to know when someone is trying to use me to advance their own agenda. I've seen people destroy careers, relationships, and lives for the sake of a good story or a viral moment. He stood up fully now, smoothing down his shirt and looking around the studio one final time. What happened here today isn't entertainment. It isn't journalism, and it sure as hell isn't the kind of authentic conversation that my fans deserve. Carson made one final, desperate plea. Blake, please, can't we find some way to work this out? This has all gotten so out of hand. Blake's response was measured but firm. Carson, the only way this could have been worked out was if it had never happened in the first place. When someone comes into an interview with a predetermined agenda to attack your character, there's no working that out. There's only deciding whether you're going to sit there and take it or whether you're going to stand up for yourself. Jenna's voice was small and strained as she made one last attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. Blake, I hope you know that we've always had tremendous respect for you and your work. Blake looked at her for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was sad rather than angry. Jenna, I came on this show because I thought I could trust you and your team to treat me with basic professional courtesy. That trust has been broken today, and I don't see how it can be repaired. With that, Blake Shelton turned and walked toward the studio exit. The cameras followed him as he moved with purpose across the set, his posture straight and his expression resolute. Just before he reached the door, he turned back one final time to address the stunned hosts and audience. To anyone watching, at home, who supports my music and my career, I want you to know that I will always try to be honest with you, but I will not allow myself to be used as a punching bag for someone else's entertainment. And with those words, Blake Shelton walked off the set of Today with Jenna and Friends, leaving behind a studio full of shocked faces and what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked about moments in daytime television history. The camera lingered on the empty chair where Blake had been sitting moments before. The abandoned microphone, a stark reminder of how quickly things could go wrong when basic respect and professionalism were thrown out the window. What do you think about Blake's reaction? Was he justified in walking off, or should he have stayed and tried to work things out? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe for more incredible stories from the world of entertainment.